it's prefiguring what you see in the Exodus, right? We've already seen this in like chapter 15 when Abraham and Sarai go down into Egypt and Pharaoh takes Sarai, and then the Most High plagues Pharaoh, and Abraham comes out of great wealth, right? Well, that's the story of the Exodus, right? The Egyptians, they wanted to keep the female children alive and slay the males. Well, if you look at the story of Genesis 15, you've got that principle there because Abraham's afraid of his life. And then obviously you've got the parallel there with the plagues. And then you've got the parallel there when he comes out with great wealth. Like when they come out of Egypt, they've got great wealth. And so these parallels continue on into chapter 16 with the story of Hagar. Hagar is the sojourner. And so really you got the roles outplaying in the story of the Exodus there. So in that part of history, you're really outplaying the story of Abraham and Sarah. And this principle is used in the gospel because Jerusalem is akin to Sarah. And obviously Sarah was barren. Well, Zion is considered to be, Zion/Jerusalem is considered to be barren in the prophets. And so really the gospel is intimately tied with the story of Abraham and Sarah. And this will link back to creation because what is the function of the story of Abraham and Sarah? It's to correct something that went wrong at creation. And so you've got this barren womb theme that's running through Genesis, through the different patriarchs or matriarchs. And so it's the Torah that's trying to tell you something in this repeating cycle, that is trying to deal with this idea of infertility and overcoming it. And this tracks back to the idea of the three-tiered curse that we see in Genesis 3. Eve would have problem in childbearing. Adam would have problems now with the ground. And you've got the animal kingdom as well. And you've got this general idea of infertility. And so basically the story of Abraham and Sarah is a response to the problem of infertility that we see begin at creation. And so when you get to the gospel, this is why they're tying together ideas of new creation, right? Why are they focusing on this idea of new creation? Where's that coming from? Why are they tying together the gospel with new creation? Well, all of these things would have been tied together in the Tanakh. And so really it's an outworking of the story of Abraham and Sarah. And so in the Gospels, you see the Messiah playing the role of Isaac. He's the one who's going to be birthed from the barren mother, where the barren mother is Jerusalem. And so his resurrection acts as a birth. And so when he resurrects, Zion/Jerusalem gives birth. Sarah has given birth. And then obviously that places the role of the believer, those who accept the gospel, in the role of Abraham. And so basically you've got the faith of Abraham right there in the gospel. And again, it's intimately tied to this idea of new creation.
Hagar is, I guess, more in the messianic. Is that just more referring to the sojourners, or?
Well, let's break down this story in relation to the Exodus first, right? Mm-hmm. What's the little hint here? Hagar, the sojourner. What were the children of Israel in Egypt? They were the sojourners. So what we've got there in the story of Egypt is you've got this kind of role reversal that's going on. Egypt is now playing the role of Sarah, right? And when we look at the Genesis story, Sarah mistreats Hagar. Hagar then flees out into the wilderness. Well, if Egypt is taking the role of Sarah and the children of Israel are taking the role of the sojourner Hagar, then you've got that story also playing out in the role of the Exodus.
Okay.
And what's really interesting is if you notice, what's the location that Hagar goes to when she flees? It's the exact location which the children of Israel first go to after they flee Egypt. And so you've got these kind of um, this outworking of this role playing of this reversal of themes that's going on. And so what I'm trying to communicate is that the story of the Exodus is really tied together with the story of Genesis and the story of Abraham and Sarah and Hagar. And so really it's intimately linked together. And so when we're reading these stories, we've got to think, okay, how does this prefigure this?
Right.
Because when it's the same principle when you get to the gospel, right? What are they trying to point us to? They're obviously pointing us to the story of Abraham and Sarah. You can see this in the Pauline epistles very clearly, like Romans chapter 3 and in Galatians. He's constantly talking about Abraham and the faith of Abraham. And he even says that in Galatians, he says that Abraham had access to a gospel. So he's associating the story of Abraham, Sarah, Hagar to the idea of a gospel. Why is he doing that? Why would he make that comment? Well, if he's seeing the links between Egypt and Genesis, and then he's also connecting that to the ideas of Messiah, then when we read the Gospels, we've also got to make those types of links. And so now, when the Messiah dies, it's really about, is Zion, Jerusalem, going to give birth? Because if she gives birth, that means the barren one has given birth, right? And we see the Apostle Paul in Galatians tries to spell this out, like in Galatians 3, I believe. He cites directly from Isaiah. Isaiah talks about the barren one, Zion, Jerusalem, giving birth. So he's intimately tying this together. And he's making this link between Zion and Sarah. And that's a very, very important link that we've got to really understand. Because then we've got to build the analogy. Sarah was barren. Jerusalem is considered barren. Who's the promised child? Well, that'd be the Messiah. So he's taken the role of Isaac. That pushes us into the faith of Abraham, right? That the barren one would give birth. Jerusalem gave birth through the resurrection of the Messiah because the resurrection acted like a birth. And this is why we've got these links, these parallels internally in the Gospels with the birth narratives, right? We've got parallels in the beginning of the Gospel and the end of the Gospel. And these links are trying to get the reader to say, look, this birth narrative and this resurrection narrative, they've got similarities, they've got parallels. And what is the text trying to tell us? Well, the text is trying to tell us that resurrection is like a birth. If there's a birth, who's the mother? Zion, Jerusalem. Zion, Jerusalem was considered barren. Zion is also connected to Sarah. So then that means we've got to have the faith that Abraham had, that a barren one would give birth. And this is why you get Romans chapter 3, Galatians chapter 3, and he's talking about Abraham and Sarah and having the gospel and having the faith of Abraham. And so this is the internal logic of why it's logical that these texts have come out this way, and they're talking about a gospel and they're talking about a resurrected Messiah. If you notice in the Gospels, the Messiah, when he's talking, he really wants to die, but his disciples don't get it. You know, why do you want to die? He's like, no, I have to die, because if he doesn't die, he doesn't get birthed. Zion doesn't give birth, and so if he dies, Zion gives birth, and you've got the outworking there of the story of Abraham and Sarah.
Sarah also being one who was laughing at the idea that after waiting for so many years, I think basically like after this many years in my old days, you know, now you're telling me that the promise is coming, but I feel like that's very similar to even like the Messiah return. Most people that I talk to are like, well, it's been so long, like we don't even know if the Messiah is really coming at this point.
I can't really comment on that. It's out of my purview, really. It's an article of faith. Um, he will tarry for as long as he needs to tarry. But I think the key thing for the moment is to really focus in on, if you're living in the first century and you got access to these texts, how would you come up with the Gospels?
Mm-hmm.
What, you know, why would it make sense if you was Torah observant and you knew the traditions and you knew this and that? Why would it be perfectly logical to present the gospel in this way? And and here's the thing, right? When you read the Gospels, what's one of the first thing the Messiah says? He says, "Repent and believe the gospel." Now, think about that for a moment, right? When we hear the word gospel, we would associate it with the death and resurrection. But if you think back chronologically, when he first says that, the disciples didn't know about death and resurrection, right? You got them in instances in the Gospels where they're not quite understanding why you're talking about dying. So they wouldn't believe what we understand to be the gospel. So why is the Messiah saying believe the gospel at that specific point in time, even
Yeah.
before he's telling everyone about his death, burial, and resurrection? The key there is Zion, Jerusalem. There was an expectation that Zion would give birth. So, and the gospel is intimately tied with Zion. You can see this in the prophet Isaiah, for instance. And so when he says believe the gospel, what he's really saying is believe that Zion is going to give birth. Now, if you start with that premise, the idea of a resurrection then flows. And it also makes sense as to why he's talking about believe the gospel at that point in time. Because he's telling the community, look, those prophecies about Jerusalem giving birth, they're about to come to pass. You just have to believe it. So it, it now changes things.
Mm-hmm.
There is no internal contradiction, in my view, that when you're reading the beginning of the Gospels, he's talking about a gospel, even though that gospel hasn't been revealed yet. And he's saying to them, believe it. Well, what is he asking them to believe? Um, so,
Just like the
you
barren
know,
one is about to give birth to the promised one, being
yeah.
that
Uh,
is
uh,
that was essentially the beginning of the gospel, even founded in the Torah.
yeah, it's the idea of infertility being overcome, right? And so these stories are weaving themselves in history in different parts of the other places in the scriptures. Um, like, for instance, when what's the function of Hagar, right? Hagar was to build up Sarah. Well, when we get to the Exodus, what are the children of Israel doing, right? They're building cities, right? They're building up Egypt. So they're even taking the role of Hagar there. So when we're now looking at history, we're really asking the question, what, what story is this outworking? Is there kind of role reversals that are going on?
Interesting.
Because this is how they're telling history, right? They're weaving the story of the matriarchs and the patriarchs into his, their history, and it's outworking into it. And so it's really for us to look for these parallels and see how this weaving goes, because it will weave itself all the way to the Messiah and into the Gospels. And so if we focus on Zion, Zion stroke Jerusalem, and if we try to make the link extremely clear between Zion, Jerusalem, and Sarah, that would build a good foundation for understanding what the gospel is all about. It would help you understand Romans 3 and what's happening in Galatians and things like this. Um, so that's where I think that we should focus on.
Yeah. So Hagar building up Sarah, and then at some point there's this role reversal that happens where Israel then becomes Sarah.
Well,
Like switches from Hagar serving Sarah
yeah,
to
these things, it's rather difficult to explain. It's people try and look for kind of like a unification between all of the different metaphors and imagery. I
Mhm.
don't believe the biblical writers would look for unification, like so it all flows into a nice story, etc., etc. They can use imagery that kind of contradicts itself, and I can give you an example of it
Mhm.
within internally in the scriptures. But I think that if we look at the stories individually and say, okay, what is this built from? And then we'll note the parallels um,
Okay.
and things like this. So, and here's the thing, right? Isaac was going to be offered up, right? And the Most High steps in and goes, "No, don't offer him." If we track that storyline into the Exodus, what do we see happen, right? If Israel's playing the role of um, Hagar and Egypt is playing the role of Sarah, when the Most High brings Hagar out, who dies? Well, it's the firstborn of the Egyptians, right?
Right.
So basically, the firstborn of the Egyptians there are taking the role of Isaac. But in this story, the Most High doesn't step in; he actually slays them. Then he brings out Hagar. So, and obviously you got the idea of a lamb, right? A lamb or a goat within the story. And what do you see being offered up in the story of Genesis, where with Abraham and his son, where he offers up an animal? So, you've got these kind of like reversals that are going on, but it's kind of integrated into the storyline. And really, this is how Israelites are telling history. It's couching it in terms of matriarchs and patriarchs and the storylines that are there, and it's outworking into how they're telling history. And that principle is very, very important if you want to understand the Gospels, because they do the same principle. So,
Okay.
uh,
So we have with Egypt we have the firstborn dying, but we also have a redemption for the people.
do you know what I find really interesting? The Apostle Paul, when he's talking about Israel as a nation, he says they're adopted. You know, why would he say that? Right? There's no known that I know of in the Second Temple period, or even after, that talks about Israel as a nation being adopted. There's no reference. Why would he do that? Why would he do that? It's a very interesting comment
That
that,
is
that
very
he
weird.
makes. What if he brings them out as basically um, Ishmael, and then he adopts them, right? If we read Genesis 21, there's an argument by a scholar who says that what's happening in Genesis 21 is about adoption. In Genesis 21, we see this peculiar story where Hagar leaves, well, she gets sent out,
Mhm.
and the child is going to die. And so she puts the child under a bush. You know, why is it
Yeah.
telling us a bush? And then she leaves the child and it cries. What the scholar says is, well, this is actually mirroring ancient Near Eastern adoption practices in the ancient Near East. If the parents didn't want the child, what they would do, they would take the child and put them in a well-known place where people pass by. And so if they heard the cry of the child, they would know that that child has been left there, abandoned, and wanted to be adopted. And so basically, you got in Genesis 21, the Most High is acting as the role of the adopter. And so he hears the cry of Ishmael. There's a concentration on Ishmael, not on the cry of the woman, but on the cry of the child.
Okay.
And he's going to be with him. And so basically what the scholar says is that's the ancient Near Eastern view of adoption. So what I'm saying to you is that when Most High brings out Israel out of Egypt, is they're taking the role of Hagar stroke Ishmael, and then the Most High is going to adopt them. And this is why this can account for the curious comment the Apostle Paul has when he's talking about adoption.
Okay.
Because he recognizes the storyline. You know, the Exodus is the storyline of Abraham, Ishmael, Hagar, and Sarah. And all he's done is he's recognized how it's weaved into the storyline.
Interesting.
But yeah, so, you know, the text spells some of this stuff out quite easily, especially how Zion is connected to Sarah. You can see this in Galatians 3 and Isaiah 54, 51, etc., etc. So, you know, it's about pointing out these things and trying to build that foundation so that people can grasp it.
Yeah.
Because, you know, what I'm seeing is, you know, they're interested in the Torah, but they're not. It's only really surface level. They're not really thinking, okay, we've got this story, but how does this story agree with what's going on in the Torah and the prophets? And I think that we've got to build more foundation for that.
All right. I mean, I kind of like this, I guess, more casual conversation with this anyway right now. So I'm just gonna keep rolling with this instead of going through the verse by verse. The three. So I've seen a couple different, I guess, takes on this. But the three angels or three men that visit Abraham, and that also being a foreshadow of the messianic age, as well as like the three different redeemers, being Elijah, Messiah of Joseph, and Messiah of David. But also that Abraham did not know that they were angels when they arrived, whereas others, which I think it's more of a modern idea, that he did know that they were angels. Do you have any take on that?
I don't really have a lot of comments on that. It's really I think the first time I've ever heard such an interpretation. So I don't have a lot of comments on that. Obviously, the angels look like men, and that's what the text says. They were described as men, right? Or at least some texts describe angels as men. So obviously, it's not always a glorious appearance that's seen.
There's a couple different words from sages that I was browsing through, but one of them were it says this was Michael, Gabriel, and Raphael, Michael came to bring tidings to Sarah, Raphael to bring healing to Abraham, and Gabriel to overturn Sodom. Um, Seen as like Elijah, and this is just my connection if that were true, but Elijah being this, John the Baptist announcing the good news, bringing the good tidings to Sarah. So there you have the gospel, but the Messiah, son of Joseph, who brings the healing, Raphael bringing the healing, and then the Messiah, son of David, bringing the destruction. Where Gabriel is overturning Sodom. It's the burning where the smoke goes up forever and ever. But ultimately ridding the world of the evil.
I think it's my. I've done some work on this. It's my personal view that in Romans, you do have the story of Sodom and Gomorrah being underpinned within the chapters, and the idea of Sodom and Gomorrah is linked obviously to the story of Abraham. And the Apostle Paul bridges again the storyline together, and he places it in the first century. I've actually done some written work on this. I don't know if you've actually read it. I don't know.
I don't think I have, but if you have it in like a Word doc, I would love to take a look.
Yeah. It'd be too much to explain right now. It's too long.
Usually all of your articles are like really, really long and in depth, and definitely not just a quick Discord discussion. So, but yeah, I would definitely be interested in taking a look at it.
But I would say this, in my personal view, not that my personal view is worth anything, I think there is some credit for the belief that the idea of three coming to one, and then that there being a judgment. I think that could underpin like a structure for a story that we see later on. I think that's perfectly logical. It would make sense to me, at least. But proving that is another matter, of course.
Right.
But it's thinking like along the right lines. How are we going to use this story, this narrative later on in history, and how's it going to weave into history? And so I think that you're going in the right direction. I don't know if I'd go as far as saying like Messiah ben David and Messiah ben Yosef. That's got a lot of issues in of itself, in my view. But
okay.
there may be something underpinning it that may serve as the basis for another story.
I had a comment on Twitch. It says, even in their manly form, the angels that were in Sodom were beautiful, and the people of Sodom wanted relations because they were so pretty. In the book of Enoch, Noah's father Lamech went to Enoch to tell him of his appearance, and Enoch told Lamech that he was of the race of angels, or from the angels.
Yeah, you do have this kind of association of beauty and angels. You also see this in some texts in the Second Temple period and just after. Concentration on someone's beauty, like the beauty of Joseph. And it's associated, generally speaking, with kind of like an angelic quality. But I don't have much more to say on that. To be honest, I didn't even know we were live.
Oh, yeah. I just typically turn it on at like 2:00, and then if any discussions happen, then they're there, and if not, then yeah, if no one shows up or anything, then I just chill for a little bit, and then we delete the VOD because nothing happened.
Nobody loves us, everybody hates us. Guess we should go and eat worms.
What?
Have you
What kind
never
of
heard that song,
is that?
Austin?
Like some song from the UK? Is that something that you guys sing?
Nobody likes you, us, everybody hates us. Nobody likes you, everybody hates you. Guess you better go and eat worms. Long, flat, slimy ones, big, fat, juicy ones, itsy bitsy, fuzzy, wuzzy worms. Up comes the first one, up comes the second one. How they wriggle and squirm.
I guess you're feeling better.
Not really, but.
So, no,
I'll
I've
tell
never
you
heard
what.
that.
We're talking about the life of Sarah, right? Let's bring in a text from Galatians.
Okay.
Yeah. So I don't know. Could you read like Galatians chapter 3? Just I haven't got any of my resources up. Because what he'll do, he'll cite from Isaiah 54. So if you could find the portion that he's dealing with Isaiah 54, and then we'll go through how he makes the analogy between Jerusalem and Sarah.
Yep. Hold on just a second.
I'm just booting up my e-sword.
Well, it's a fairly short one, I guess, but
I tell you what, it's I've just clicked on the wrong thing. Hang on a minute. Is it Galatians 3 or Galatians 4?
it might be in four. Four is talking about the sons and heirs.
Right,
Those who are born of a woman under the law.
Yeah. So I tell you what, could you read from Galatians chapter 4, verse 22 and read
Hagar and
verse
Sarah.
28. So 22 to 28, chapter 4.
Okay.
Verse 22 to 28.
Yep. For it is written that Abraham had two sons, one by a slave woman, and one by a free woman. But the sons of a slave was born according to the flesh, while the son of a free woman was born through promise. Now this may be interpreted allegorically. These women are the two covenants. One is from Mount Sinai, bearing children for slavery, and she is Hagar. Now Hagar is Mount Sinai in Arabia. She corresponds to the present Jerusalem, for she is in slavery with her children. But the Jerusalem above is free, and she is our mother. For it is written, Rejoice, O barren one who does not bear, break forth and cry aloud, you who are not in labor, for the children of the desolate one will be more than those of the one who has a husband. Now you, brothers, like Isaac, are children of promise. But just as at that time he who was born according to the flesh persecuted him who was born according to the Spirit, so also it is now.
Okay. So we've been talking about how things are weaved into history, right? The story of the patriarchs and the matriarchs are weaved into history. So notice what's happening here. He's associating the events at Sinai with Hagar, right? So he's doing it right there. He's looking at that specific point in time and he's associating it with the story there of a matriarch, Hagar. So the very principle that I've just talked about is happening right there. And so we've got this citation from Isaiah 54. Be glad, barren one not bearing, break forth and shout. The one not travailing, for more are the children of the desolate rather than she having the husband. Right? In the context of Isaiah 54, this is talking about Jerusalem or Zion. And so what he's doing here, he's associating Sarah to Jerusalem stroke Zion. Because Sarah was barren, but in the prophets, Zion is considered to be barren. So you've got two barren women, and they're being linked together. And so it's talking about how the barren one's going to break forth and shout because she's bearing a child or bearing children. And then he links this specifically to Isaac. But brothers, we are the children of promise according to Isaac. So right there, in that text, he's associating Sarah, Zion, and Isaac into the first century. And he's also pushing that story back into the events at Sinai. And so when you've got the resurrection of the Messiah, the resurrection acts as a birth. And there are parallels from the resurrection to the birth narratives that we see in like Luke and in Matthew.
Mm-hmm.
And it's designed to get the reader to associate the two together. Birth and resurrection are being tied together. And so that would make sense if your premise was that Zion was about to give birth. Who's she going to give birth to? Well, the promised child, the Messiah. And so as the Messiah is now resurrected, we get to participate in that promise. And so we also become, we are children of promise according to Isaac. And so you're also participating as the birth of Isaac as well, because you're now in the Messiah. Simultaneously, you will also have the faith of Abraham, right? Abraham had faith that his barren wife would give birth. Well, they were now having faith that Jerusalem, Zion, had given birth. And so that you've got your analogy there between the story of Genesis and the gospel, what's happening in the gospels. And so this now makes sense as to why the Messiah in the gospels has this strong focus on dying. You know, he knows that he's got to die. His disciples can't quite figure out why. If he doesn't die, there's going to be no birth. If there's no birth, that means Jerusalem is going to remain barren. But he dies, he resurrects, Zion gets her child. Thus, you have the gospel. And so you get this idea of the gospel specifically in Isaiah, right? You see it in texts like Isaiah chapter 40, Isaiah 61. But in context, who's that to? Well, the gospel is to Zion. The gospel is to Jerusalem, right? It's the good news, right?
But would a virgin birth also be a like coming forth out of a barren one, essentially, or is this like it has to be out of the ground, similar to like the Adam situation, and like there's numerous other reasons why Jerusalem as a land would be giving birth, but just wondering if it would relate to virgin birth.
This is more complicated, and this would take a lot more time to break down, but this is kind of a summary version. Mm-hmm. So in the first century, the ground which Adam came from was understood to be virgin ground, virgin soil. This term virgin soil is a technical term. And we can see these in texts like in Josephus. And because I didn't know we was going to go in this direction, I don't have all my resources in front of me, but I'll just keep going. So when Josephus is talking about the creation of Adam, he says that Adam came from virgin ground, virgin soil. And so there is some kind of association between Adam and virgin soil that's coming from. This term virgin soil also pops up in rabbinic material as well. You'll see this in the Talmud, where it uses this technical term virgin soil. And there's a few other texts that kind of use this term. And so basically, Adam was being viewed as coming up out of the ground, out of virgin soil. And so you've got this kind of emphasis on a virgin-born Messiah. Why would that be? What expectation would there be for someone to be born of a virgin? So we're going to flip back to kind of first Adam, last Adam theology, right? If we notice in like Corinthians, the Apostle Paul talks about this first Adam, last Adam. And so there's going to be some type of analogy or connection between the two. And so if Adam was being born of virgin soil, that would also necessitate the last Adam to be to be born of some kind of virgin. And this is why he's tying also the idea of new creation. Why is he talking about new creation? Right? He's flipping back to Genesis, concentrating on Adam and saying, look, Adam is basically prefiguring the Messiah. So he's making those types of connections. And so I think it's perfectly logical that they're talking about this kind of virgin born Messiah, because they're couching it in terms of new Adam. And so when you look at it that way, obviously you got Miriam or Mary, and she's presented as a virgin. But she's also representing Zion, in my view.
Okay.
Because we've got these parallels between the beginning of the Gospels and the end of the Gospels. And Miriam is part of those parallels. One quick example, I've written all this out, but this is a very, very summary version. If you notice the character of Joseph, in the Gospels, generally speaking, you'll see one Joseph at the beginning and one Joseph at the end. What's the function of Joseph of Arimathea? Why is he popping up in the storyline? Well, could it be that when you've got the birth of the Messiah, you've got a Mary and a Joseph right there next to him, or right there in close contact with him, just like you've got in the beginning of the Gospels? And so when you look at the resurrection narratives, you see these kind of Marys at the end. But you also have a Joseph of Arimathea. So you've got Joseph and Mary at the beginning, Joseph and Mary at the end. Again, it just plugs into the idea of parallels being drawn between the beginning and the end.
Okay.
And so basically in the prophets, Zion / Jerusalem, in some texts, is considered a virgin. And this is metaphorical language when it comes to Zion / Jerusalem, because the text can talk about how Zion / Jerusalem is like in terms of a harlot, but then in other texts she can be understood as a virgin. So it doesn't matter that the imagery doesn't always kind of gel together in a complete harmony. You can have this kind of internal contradiction in biblical material. And so basically, again, the role of Mary, is to prefigure Virgin Zion giving birth to the Messiah, because now he's coming out of Zion, the virgin soil, so to speak. Just how the last Adam, or the first Adam, came out of virgin soil. And if you think about this very carefully, if you read Revelation chapter 22, it specifically links New Jerusalem to Eden, right? How do we know this? When we look at Revelation 22, what imagery do we see? We see the tree of life in New Jerusalem. So what two imageries there is it connecting together? It's connecting Eden to New Jerusalem, and it's connecting them together. So you've got this idea of creation and Jerusalem now kind of merging in together. And it's very, very interesting, obviously, that in the Gospel of John, the Messiah obviously gets buried in a garden, or he gets raised in a garden, right? And then he gets mistaken for a gardener. Hint, hint, nudge, nudge.
Right.
What was Adam meant to do? Meant to be a gardener, right? So you got these little connections to the story of Eden. And what's very, very interesting is that in the prophets, in Isaiah, for instance, Isaiah 51, Jerusalem is promised to become like Eden, right? So this kind of Jerusalem-Eden connection is already in the prophets, and it's being used in places like Revelation and being hinted at in the Gospel of John, that these things are fusing together. So you've got all of these different connections that are going on between birth, new creation, and things like this. And it's all meshing together.
Yeah, the I guess the first Adam, or the I guess like the repeat story would make sense, where you've got this almost like the Jesus's life would be a representation of all of Israel to begin with, but also this whole promise thing where it starts off with like this virgin birth coming out of the ground, or coming forth from a virgin, but then later on you have this secondary birth happening, this other one that also represents a continuation of that story, which is part of that promise.
There's so many levels to this, right? You just hit on another thing which would take another some time to explain, how the Messiah is actually representing Israel in the Gospels, how his life mimics Israel. Why is it doing that, right? Israel go down into Egypt. He goes down in the Gospel of Matthew. He goes down into Egypt. They come out of Egypt. He comes out of Egypt. They go down to the Jordan. He goes down to the Jordan. They go into the wilderness for 40 years. He goes into the wilderness for 40 days. Why is he mimicking the storyline of Israel? Well, Israel is being presented also as a new Adam. In Exodus, for instance, in Exodus chapter 1, verse 7, they were fruitful, multiplying, and filling the land. This is Adamic language being ascribed to the nation. They're going to be taken from Egypt and they're going to be placed in the promised land. And later on in the prophets, what do we see? The promised land is associated with Eden. You can see this in texts like in Ezekiel, for instance. And so basically, the nation itself is meant to be the new Adam. And so the Messiah in the Gospels is representing all of the nation, but because he's representing all of the nation, he's also representing the new Adam, because that was what the nation was meant to be, the new Adam. And again, all of this ties together. When you look at like Revelation 22, it ties together Jerusalem, it ties together Eden. And so basically the Most High is going to take his new Adam and place it back in Eden. Even the imagery of New Jerusalem descending down is like the imagery that we see of the Garden of Eden, right? The Garden of Eden was planted. Well, that's kind of a descent motion. You're planting something into the ground. And so New Jerusalem comes down, it descends down, just like how Eden was planted. So again, it's intimately tied in with the motions of what's happening in Genesis.
Is the this might go into a different well, most likely goes into a different direction entirely, but Israel representing Adam, and we have like the temple representing all of creation, and Messiah being this the hybrid of temple and nation all in one. Is there a representation of the creation within Messiah, but on the day levels? Like, is there any parallels that can be pulled from that?
When you say the day levels, what do you mean? Can you define that a bit more?
Yeah, so you've got the like the land coming out of the waters, and then that's where the the temple is built after the coming out of the chaos waters. I'm trying to think of other similarities. I know that there's like the light.
Yeah, I mean, internally within Genesis 1, you do have connections between the first 3 days of creation and the last 3 days of creation. So day 1 corresponds to day 4, day 2 corresponds to day 5, day 3 corresponds to day 6. You've got this kind of symmetry that goes on. And so the temple is basically a microcosm of the entire universe. And what I mean by that is a small scale, so a small working scale of the universe. And this was very well understood in the Second Temple period. You've got different writers who talk about this, like Philo, Josephus, and other. You've even got this in the rabbinic material. And so when you look at the high priest, also, you're also looking at the microcosm of the entire universe. And different parts of his garments represent different parts of the universe. Again, very well understood in the Second Temple period. You can see this from the rabbinic material. You can see this from Philo, Josephus, etc. And so when you're looking at the Messiah, you're also looking at the high priest, right? So we've not only got Adam, we've got the nation. We're now looking and ascribing to the Messiah. We've now also got the high priest. Now we're ascribing to the Messiah. And so when you think about the high priest, you're thinking in terms of all of creation. He represents all of creation. And again, it goes back to this idea of why the gospel writers talking about this idea of new creation. You know, where they're getting that concept from. Well, it's internal. You've got these connections that are going on. And so and again, you track back to Adam. What was Adam? Well, you've got priestly language being ascribed to Adam in Genesis, right? He was to work and keep the garden. Well, these Hebrew terms are used later on for the priesthood. That's just one example. And so Adam was being ascribed or associated with priesthood. And you can see hints of this in texts like in Jubilees, for instance. Jubilees flat out says that the Garden of Eden was the Holy of Holies, right? Adam had close proximity to the Most High. It would be natural to associate temple with Eden. And you can also see this again in Revelation 22. In Revelation 22, you've got New Jerusalem coming down. It's associated with Eden. And what are the people wearing on their foreheads when they enter into New Jerusalem? It's the divine name that they have. And if you think about the clothing of the high priest, what do you see in Exodus? He bears the divine name on his forehead. So it's ascribing priestly status to people who enter into Jerusalem. So again, it's another connection that's being made, and all of these things are tying together, and it's building their understanding of what the Messiah, who the Messiah is, and what it's meant to do. What does it mean for mankind?
Isn't there's the verse about the the name also being on his thigh, and I know that like grabbing someone's thigh or something would be a sign of like making a promise. Is there any other significance behind like the name being written on the thigh other than relating to a promise?
Off the top of my head, I don't really have much commentary on that. I mean,
I was wondering if there's some like high priestly thing or something that.
Yeah, you're talking about a text in Revelation, which I don't. Is it in chapter 18? Revelation 18 that you're talking about?
Let me.
In a different text. Anyway, chapter 18 has strong links to the actual Targumic version. I believe it's Targum Jonathan. I believe it is. Where there are parallels between what's happening in the Targum Jonathan to Revelation 18. So it may be built off a tradition or understanding, but I don't have much more comment on that.
All right, I am writing that as a note because I did not know that those two had ties together. So now I'm going to read it from that perspective later on. It's Revelation 19:16 is where it comes from.
Yeah, that's it. Not 18, it's 19, isn't it? Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, on his robe and on his thigh, he has the name written: King of Kings, Lord of Lords. All right. Cool. Okay. We've let's see. I'm trying to see what else we probably cover in this. This is a little bit. I don't know. This goes all the way over into 21 and talking about the sacrifice, but that's probably going to be a whole conversation of its own. Yeah. I don't think we've covered quite a bit.
I think we have.
Yeah.
Hopefully not information overload, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, we'll probably do some more like verse by verse throughout the week. I'm hoping to get, I don't know, just get caught up, but do some more fine nitty gritty commentary as well. Yeah, we'll just resume this next week and then dive into. Say this covers. Yeah, we'll just get into like Sodom. Oh, just after that. So yeah, chapters 19 through. Probably 19 through 22, because I feel like the sacrifice of Isaac is going to be that's going to be like an hour-long conversation.
I may have one more comment. Hang on a minute. Let's see if I can find it. Or maybe I. Where was it?
Angelina.
Hello.
Hello.
No, I can't
How's it
find
going?
it.
YOLO.
It is going.
That's good.
I woke up super late today. At like 1 o'clock.
Wow.
In the afternoon.
Okay.
Yeah.
How did you do that? Your kids let you sleep?
Apparently, and we had like the oldest daughter come and knock at the door, and we were like, "Oh, I wonder what's wrong," because like both my wife and I slept the entire time, and our eldest knocked on our door, and I was like, "That never happened." She's the one that sleeps in the longest, and so I was like, "Oh, something must be wrong," and look at the clock, 1 o'clock. Oh, yeah, that's someone might be hungry for
What
I don't know
were
1
your
of 2
other
meals.
kids doing?
Just like watching TV and hanging out.
Did they get themselves a snack?
Yeah, they made themselves cereal and things.
Oh, okay. Wait, how old's your youngest?
4.
You left a 4-year-old unattended for so many hours and your house was still standing.
There's plenty of babysitters. We made lots of them. So that's just what you do. If you want to sleep in, you have to breed more babysitters.
Or you just don't breed anything.
That's also an option. Yes. Yeah, I don't think I've slept in till like 1 o'clock in a very, very, very long time. So I take the command rest on the Sabbath very seriously here. Okay.
Well, there we go.
Yep. But yeah, The one that we'll do next week is going to be a lot on the sacrifice stuff, but I think that the Torah it presents you with a lot of questions in that
So,
that
are we
demand
actually
answers.
gonna do the proper study next week then?
Like the verse by verse.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we'll do that. Yeah.
Any other comments, questions, opinions, insults?
Piff?
I'm just sad we didn't read the scriptures.
Oh, I'm sorry. I can have it read it all off. Do you want to go through it?
It's okay.
Okay.
Sometimes it's better just to kind of talk through it.
And just go all over the place. I like it. That's usually my style of of doing things, but yeah, I know a lot of people don't like it, which is why I try to go do the verse by verse. But I enjoy the more like vague.
No, it's more I'm quite
approach.
It's more I'm quite poorly, so I don't have the energy for mental thought processes.
Yeah.
I'm still quite sick.
But there we go. So hopefully it was interesting.
Yeah,
It didn't.
Some kind of
I
sense.
think I phased out, but I've heard. I think I've heard most of it before.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Spent too much time with Naz.
There's no such thing as too much time with Naz.
Naz bought me a bow that shoots unicorns to cheer me up. What? Because I'm poorly.
What is that in? What game?
I think it was 2.
Oh my gosh.
It literally awesome. Shoots unicorns pooping rainbows.
What the? How did you? I don't even. I thought that game has a little bit more. I don't know, realism, even though it's like all fictional magic and stuff.
I think that's something you need to decide, Angelina. I personally don't have anything to do with it. I sometimes have to by proxy because of the people I take care of, and it's something that they want to do. And part of my job is facilitating other people's freedom of choice. But otherwise, so no, I would not. I know it's harder and it's bigger in America. Halloween, isn't it? It's quite a big thing.
I forgot that was coming up.
It's tomorrow.
Is it? Oh wow, it is.
Someone told me it was tomorrow.
Yeah, that's the 30th today.
Mm-hmm.
I guess right now is a really good time to get some Purim costumes.
Are you gonna read out Esther and get your kids to go boo?
Yes, 100%.
I tried to make Naz do that. He doesn't like it very much.
No? Yeah, we've been trying to...
I forced you to do that 2 years in a row, haven't I, Naz? Read Esther with me and go boo. You gone quiet.
Sorry, I've got a Twitch comment. Food for thought. Looking forward to your interpretation on Yeshua's claim to be Ben David or Bar David or Ben David. Yeah, he makes 2 references to it. Okay, yeah, that'd be an interesting conversation.
I thought he was. Why would there be a contention?
I think the difference would be in the Bar David or Ben David.
Isn't that just semantics?
Possibly.
It just seems like a bit of an odd way of posing a question.
Isn't bar? Because bar is more Aramaic, isn't it?
Yes. Bar's Aramaic.
And then Ben is just the more
Yeah.
Hebrew, meaning son of.
Why would there be a contention?
I don't think it's the contention between whether it's the bar or Ben, but more so the
whether he's the promised Messiah or what. I'm confused.
His claim to be the Messiah says curious to his challenge of the Pharisees. So I think it's in relation to like the deity of Christ. So when he's claiming to be like
but
I
then
am
how
he.
it, but then how I don't know, because I would never deal in that discussion in a kind of deity concept, because it's not really what's going on in the conversations, even with the Pharisees and even with the accusations that they make against Yeshua.
I wonder
So
if this
that's
is from
why I'm poking, because it's a slightly odd frame.
He's making a stance to see.
I can't see what this person is saying. How do I see what this person is saying? Hello, person. I don't see what you're saying.
Let me turn on the bot real quick so it shows up in the voice chat. I forgot.
Yeah, that's why I opened voice chat and I was like, "Where is this person speaking?"
I'm sorry.
I don't understand. I am puzzlement.
Yeah, let me make sure that the bot is up. I usually do that before the stream start. It's my late start today. Okay. I haven't finished my Red Bull.
I'm drinking fermented ginger and lemon
with Jaeger
drink. No, it's not alcoholic. It's good for your guts. It's low sugar. It's kombucha.
What is this? Ooh.
You ever had kombucha?
I have. My wife used to make a bunch of it. Test.
When I'm poorly, I find that kombucha is really settling. I can't see it still.
Okay.
You broke it.
Yeah, probably.
Wait, just give me a link and then I can click on the Twitch and.
Okay, hold on. I gotta generate new tokens. It's I think that's it. That's why my password or my authentication expired on my bot. Of course it did.
Sorry, not the fastest typer. I see a person.
I see one. There we go. Test. Working now? No, still not working.
Kyle? I'm dyslexic. What I do, I apologize if I pronounce your name strange. The Kal-El? Kal-El. Oh, Kal-El. Okay, got you. It's because you threw me off with a capital E.
So it's like, is that a capital I or?
He's saying like L, something L, the Kal-El. Sorry. I'm stupid. I apologize.
All right, I'm not seeing where.
Was this the person who asked the question?
Yes. Yeah. So there's an he's making a stance to see how they understood his reference of Psalms when David referring to him being at his right side. You'll see the Son of Man sitting in the right
hand of the Most High. But there you see him. But he was seen at his right hand.
Also,
Surely
Cal,
that's basically.
if you want to jump in our Discord and join us in voice chat or whatever, you're more than welcome to. And since you stream too, you are more than welcome to also stream. I don't know. Some people have like an issue with that, I guess, but we don't.
An issue
streams.
An issue with what?
Some people have issues like if you are in someone's Discord and then you're streaming, like while they're streaming, they're like, "Oh no, you have to like this is my stream." I don't really care. It's just theology chatting. Someone else wants to stream it, they can stream it.
Well, I mean, we sit in here and stream all sorts, so.
Yeah, exactly. Like, if anyone joins in and is like, "Oh, I'm gonna use your Discord chat and stream from it," we don't really have anything to hide, so.
You're supposed to have a good defense at all times, Kalel. You cannot bring up a counterpoint and then not be prepared to defend it.
Okay, so what? I guess
Good,
what is the
then
question?
You should bring it. I got all intrigued, and now I'm being told I am not ready to have this discussion. The Piff is disappointed.
Mm-hmm.
I am disappointed.
You can't disappoint the Piff. I got these sunflower seeds, and they're so good. I can just munch on sunflower seeds all day.
Okay. So what's the question around that? How could I? Yeah, but it would be talking prophetically. Prophetically, the Messiah's talked about all through the Tanakh. So he also says, what does Moses say about me? But there's a context there. Not literally saying, they knew I was there, but they knew he was coming.
Like how to, like within
Otherwise,
visions and prophecies.
We wouldn't know that Yeshua is the Messiah if we didn't have those prophecies, because that's what he used to substantiate his claims, and that's what the apostles used to substantiate his claims when they preached the gospel.
But okay, so I'd make this case. It also speaks of Elijah, like them knowing that Elijah is going to be there before the Messiah is there. But does that mean that John the Baptist existed before John the Baptist was born? Even though they understood it and they refer to it more in the present tense of, the Elijah.
You saying that you believe that the Messiah was there? You saying that you believe David met the Messiah? I'm a little bit confused about what's the claim.
I don't know.
It's all dancing around.
The Messiah of David is not that David is the Messiah, but
it makes no sense as food for thought, because nothing here is coherent. I'm very confused. What is the food for thought? Are we thinking that David met him? Well, what's the food for thought? There is, and you have one in your head, you're just not saying it. There's a prerequisite to this statement. And the reason why it's ambiguous to those of us who are reading it is because we're not privy to that statement in your head that presupposes that as being something you view as food for thought.
I think there's even arguments to say that, scriptural arguments to say that Abraham saw the Messiah
Yeah, but I want to know the context of this one.
Prophetic, of course.
I've heard those. I want to know what this one is.
Yeah.
I want to know. Because I'm annoying.
She's doing, what do you call it, sickly?
I am. I don't.
poorly.
I'm telling
Did you say
you. I'm telling
poorly?
you. I have been sick ever since I've had the booster shot. I'm telling you. I was sick for 4 days. Got better. Got sick again. Went back to work, and now I'm sick again.
Well, I'm what people call a pureblood. So.
What's a pure blood?
Someone who hasn't gotten a vaccine.
You've never had a shot?
Uh-uh.
Of anything, not even like when you were a child, against like measles or
I had some, like,
or
as a
Ebola
baby.
or meningitis.
I got some as
those.
Yeah, I got some as like a baby, but that was it.
Some of them are really important.
I've never gotten like a flu shot or anything else.
With
Well, if
the
it's
stuff
important, then
that goes around.
I hope
like you could get Ebola, right?
I guess I could, but if that happens,
and then you would be very dead.
I mean, maybe, you know.
I wanted to hear people's thoughts as why he challenged the Pharisees to who David said he was. Because he's doing what he does. He's substantiating his claim by saying, by kind of being a little bit facetious, even like, well, are you not watching what's happening?
He never he just claims that he is the.
He doesn't need to say anything.
Son of David. He is the rightful heir to the throne.
He is everything he does. Everything you read in scripture.
There's no actual proof that he is of the bloodline. Oh, this goes into like the virgin talk, I think. Whether or not it is whether or not the bloodline has to be a actual bloodline or not.
Kal-El, are you American?
Yes, he's American.
These are the sorts of discussions I always end up having with Americans.
America. American.
Seem to have a very specific way of generally approaching theology. It's interesting because different cultures, there are differences in different cultures on how they approach, generally speaking, how they approach theology and their ideas and their philosophies.
I think like a lot of the discussion comes from the like your tribe comes from your father, and it would be claimed that it has to be from like
your
in
name
order for the promise.
Your name always comes from you. You always take on your father's name.
And then the promise is that it's the seed of Abraham, the seed of David, and then to say that there is a virgin birth would essentially be like, oh, actually the seed isn't from.
Well, the Most High created everything. Isn't everything technically from him anyway? So.
Oh, you believe that he is the bloodline. Okay. So it's not about the virgin birth. They didn't walk around with genealogy scripts. They actually did have quite a few, like anyone
There's
who's
two recorded in the scriptures.
Yeah, genealogy was a huge issue back then. So everything was based on your genealogy.
And they had to go every year to like re-sign a consensus, didn't they?
You had to know what your genealogy was, and people would identify you by your genealogy because that determined like what roles you played in Israel. It determined a lot of things. For him to claim it on the spot, I think that's just a claim that he is the son of David, but saying that he's the son of David is very much a specific claim. He's claiming to be the Messiah.
Unfortunately, it didn't seem to have any ramifications on who was high priest. That went to the highest bidder.
Right.
Here are the priestly robes. Who's going to pay Rome the most?
Mm-hmm. That was an interesting
Yeah, no, do,
era.
because sorry, I know I joke around a lot, but I'm actually genuinely interested.
Wait. Yeah. The I think that the claiming to be the Messiah of David while also not fulfilling the requirements of the Messiah of David during that time would have been something very, very bold to claim. Like, he's fulfilling all the Messiah of Joseph prophecies, but then also claiming to be the Messiah of David, which is a reconciliation of the two offices.
The Messiah of Joseph is the Messiah of David, that he is the Messiah of all.
Right. But
So
they were
one and
looking
the same.
for
They
right,
were looking for someone to save them from Rome.
Yeah, they were looking for
They
the
were looking
Messiah
for the
of David
second.
only.
They were looking for the second coming before even the first had arrived.
Yeah.
But then you had this time of silence, so to speak, where the Most High was quiet.
So the reason why most Jews do not believe he was the Messiah is because what they're looking for is the Messiah of David. They don't think the Messiah of Joseph is necessarily a role that has to be fulfilled. It's just that it can be fulfilled, because there are two distinct, or what is seen as two distinct Messiahs, who are really just one Messiah, but Judaism holds that they are two different Messiahs. Yeah. One is supposed to die, be resurrected, go through like the afflicted one or the suffering servant. That's the Messiah of Joseph. So Jesus fulfilled all that stuff, and he was supposed to also
Jews
be resurrected.
Believe he's the Messiah.
Right.
Just the caveat.
He was also supposed to be resurrected. Jesus was resurrected. So you have all that fulfillment. On the Messiah of David's side, this is the one that the Jews were waiting for. They didn't really care too much about the Messiah of Joseph, sadly, but they were waiting for the Messiah of David, because the Messiah of David prophecies are everything that you see in the New Covenant, the end times. This is where he comes in with wrath, puts all enemies under his feet. He restores the kingdom. All of God's people from all corners of the earth are gathered together. The law flows from Zion. Everyone has the law written on their hearts.
Do you know what's weird about the whole two Messiah thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is you have no pattern in the Tanakh which would point towards that being the case. The Most High's always repeated the exact same pattern with a singular individual.
Right.
And there would
the seed of David is a singular, not a...
Exactly. And the only other side that would come along that is the counterpart, which is the opposite, which is the enemy. Mm-hmm. So they don't understand. I mean, you're familiar with like the rule of no redundancy and all that jazz, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's almost like a odd kind of picking and choosing with interpreting of the scripture. I know there was like,
I think this is why decent case, even when there was doubt, you can even point to the verses like the stick of Ephraim, the stick of Judah. Put them in one hand. These are one now.
But this is the problem, I think, that kind of happened with the more kind of as Judaism progressed onwards after Christ, obviously away from Christ, the side that moved away from Christ, the Judaisms that went the other way than the other Judaisms, as you start to put more and more trust and faith in man's interpretation. And I think that's also why I would say, like, when you asked me that question the other day about Talmud, that's why I said it was a loaded question. Because there's parts of the Talmud that can be substantiated, and I've always hated being trying to be put in like a box, because I think that all things should be questioned and taken as far as they can go. So rather than making a statement of, well, I like this text or I like this text, it's well, what does this text have to offer? What in it can I take and build something tangible that adds to my understanding of script of the Holy Scriptures? Because at the end of the day, the Holy Scriptures is the authority. God Most High is the authority, not a man's interpretation of his word is the authority. He's the ultimate authority, and no matter how a man chooses to view that word or use it or try to make claims of how to walk it that are outside of what is actually written, I think people have to be really careful with that, because you could end up in a very works-based ethic without even realizing it, and then completely putting to bed the very reason why the Messiah had to come.
True. So he didn't restore the kingdom, so for him not to yeah, so the Messiah of David prophecies about like global peace and crushing the enemy and all that stuff, which Judaism is still waiting for, is the same thing that we are still waiting for, because that has not come yet. So Jews, Christians, Catholic, Mormon, whatever, they're all waiting for the Messiah to return and restore everything. The difference is that we, like those who are followers of Christ, know that the Messiah is not a different Messiah. It is Jesus who is going to return and then fulfill the rest of these promises. He already fulfilled it, the first half, and now we're waiting for the second half to be fulfilled. This is the hope of the Messiah that we have.
This is the time where we get to help save other people.
Right. And so it hasn't happened. So anytime that like most Christians talk to someone who's Jewish and they're like, hey, this is why you have to believe Jesus is the Messiah, because he fulfills all Messiah prophecies, that's completely
wrong approach.
Yeah, it's the wrong approach entirely, because they're like, oh really? So this is world peace, this is the eternal kingdom right here, this is it, where I have to go to work every day and I'm persecuted and we have like Nazis and all that stuff running around. Like, this is not the Messianic kingdom here. This is not the 1,000-year reign. Messiah is not seated in Zion. The law is not flowing forth. People are still telling people about God because not everyone knows God. A lot of the things that are part of that new covenant aren't here yet because the new covenant is not here yet. It's coming, but it's not here yet. And so we have like these sneak previews of the things to come, and like law in our hearts, we have like a basic general minimalist standard of, you know, right and wrong that most people know of. So it's in there, but it's like this little small down payment. The ability to like speak in tongues for, you know, certain people or whatever. These are all small down payments on this, but that is not where we're at yet, where everyone speaks a single language. There isn't world peace, all this stuff. So when you're talking to a Jew and you're saying, hey, he fulfilled the messianic role and he is the Messiah, you're telling them something that is telling them something that is basically completely false to them, because they look around, they're like, really, he's Messiah of David? How? Because they're not thinking Messiah of Joseph. So you'd have to first prove that he's Messiah of Joseph, and then prove that the Messiahs of Joseph and David are one and the same. And at that point, then you can show that he will return and do that. I think the other approach is the deity discussion, which
no.
but so this is where if you approach a Jewish person and you say, well, he is the Messiah and I can prove it because he's God, that completely destroys any credibility you have, because one who knows Torah really, really well inside and out is not going to say, oh, well, anyone can come down, and as long as they claim to be God, they can change all of the laws and they can do whatever they want, and it doesn't matter if they fulfill the promises or not, because they're God, they can do whatever. You can't put God in a box. That approach will never win over any Jewish people.
Austin, they did put God in a box because they said that Jesus was God. They put him in a flesh box.
A flesh box? That sounds so... Never mind. It just sounds bad. But yeah, I think a lot of it is just wrong approach when talking with Jews. We have quite a few Jewish people who do not believe in the Messiah. We have Jewish people that do believe in the Messiah, but we also have Jewish people that don't believe in the Messiah. And talking with them, we can have very, very civil conversations about the Messiahs, the different rules of the Messiah, why they have their view. And oftentimes it's just, I don't think that's how it is, but scripturally, I can't prove you wrong. So that's generally where our discussions lead. Whereas like with a Christian, like a modern Christian talking to a Jew, trying to prove that Jesus is full Messiah and all prophecies have been fulfilled, that you're going to have a completely different response where they're just going to be like, well, here's this verse, you're misinterpreting this one.
Most contemporary Christians don't know their scriptures from the back of their
They don't know
something.
the Old Testament at all.
Well, they don't even know the New Testament, so they don't. How many pastors have you met that actually understand the writings of Paul?
Ooh.
Two? Maybe one?
Okay, so
None?
I haven't met anyone who's like outside of Torah that understands Paul.
There you go.
Because everything that
You
Paul
can't
speaks about
understand-
are in.
You can't understand him unless you understand the rest.
And he speaks heavily in targums and rabbinical commentary.
Yes. He's a smart cookie.
Yeah, you cannot. Oh, hey, welcome.
Hey, well,
I figured it out.
Oh, hey, welcome.
you're echoing. Echo.
There we go. The echo's been fixed.
Shabbat shalom. Oh, mine's over, but maybe yours is still going.
Mine is definitely still going.
Well, sherbet lemons to you.
Yay.
Okay, is it still echoing?
Nope.
No, that's
you're
good.
now.
You're good.
Okay. Great. Well, it's nice to meet you all.
Likewise.
You too?
Yeah, so basically what I was trying to convey is not so much to question whether or not he was, of the Davidic line. It was more so that I think he was doing everything for a specific reason, even reasons that we may not have understood, that what Father put in him would transcend generations to where we would start to see pieces of the puzzle that he didn't even know that he was laying at that point.
I like that.
So when he references to the Pharisees that, well, because he's challenging them, he wants to see what they'll actually say, because he wants them to say specifically right then and there that he is talking, David is talking prophetically about someone in the future, or he's wanting them to say that David was referencing Solomon because Solomon was his heir, right? So, and Solomon was the one who sat at his right side. So that's where the reference that I was trying to convey is that he made 2 points to say it. And the last thing he says in the New Testament is, I am the root and the offspring of David. I am the bright morning star. And that's what I had on my Twitch channel. I was just wanting to stir a conversation regarding it, because I thought it was weird that he felt not only that he said it twice, but that was the last thing that he said. I don't know.
I think that there's definitely like a point to bringing out the rabbinical interpretation of that, because the Sadducees were very much I think in this part he's talking to like Pharisees, but the Sadducees in generally rejected the rabbinical. They were the sola scriptura of Judaism at the time, and so by pulling out these things and being like, who sits at the right hand of David or whatever, you would have to lean on the rabbinical at that point. And so if anyone that you talk to, if you were to say, how do you interpret this verse, or you bring up a verse and see how they respond to it, that would determine whether or not they were a Pharisee or if they were a Sadducee. And
I see.
And then you would be able to talk to them accordingly. Because if you're talking to a Sadducee, it's going to be impossible to convey that you're the Messiah when sola scriptura doesn't really speak of that. That is only found in the rabbinic.
I got you. All right.
That's my personal take on it anyway.
Sure. I like it. Makes sense.
If he knew that they were Pharisees ahead of time, then at that point, I don't know. I don't think that either the House of Shammai or Hillel during that time disagreed with the rabbinic view of a Messiah coming, or the interpretations of Messiah within Scripture. Because the Pharisee viewpoint, whether Hillel or Shammai, the Pharisee viewpoint is that there is a resurrection of the dead. They do believe in the two Messiahs. So I don't... If he knew that they were Pharisees ahead of time, I don't know what the point would be of bringing it up other than to show that he is the Messiah.
Yeah, that's what threw me off, was I didn't really understand how he was going to make that point clear, because he knew that he wasn't going to fulfill the role of the Ben David, because he wasn't going to restore the kingdom. So by him even bringing it up and to make the statement, and to me, regardless of whether it was, the Sadducees or the Pharisees, it seemed almost like banging your head against the wall. Like what would actually be the point in making that claim? I don't know. It just kind of threw me off.
Yeah, and he might even be leaning, because I, as far as like the two messiahs, I'm not sure how far back the split goes. Like in rabbinic literature, you can see that there are the Messiah of Joseph prophecies, who is to come just before the Messiah of David. And Messiah of David has to wait until the resurrection of Messiah of Joseph. But as far as them being two different messiahs, this is where it's like, I don't know where the split happened and when it became two different messiahs, or if it's always been two different ones, and throughout the prophets and everything else, they've been trying to say that it's just one messiah. And that's where like the stick thing, where I think it's in Ezekiel, where he tells them to grab stick of Judah, stick of Ephraim, put them into one hand, and the two will merge into one stick, and you're to show that to the people. And tribe of Judah being the lineage of David, tribe of Ephraim being Joseph. And so it's like trying to show you that there's this merging of these two. So it's possible that they always thought it was going to be two through reading scriptures, and there's this point within scriptures that he's trying to show that they're going to be one, and the people are going to keep on rejecting the one. Or if it was always one, and then later on people started attributing it to two different ones. Be interesting to look at either way. I don't know if maybe Naz has some more info on it, or
he left us.
No.
He did. He left us like half an hour ago. He ran away.
I can probably reach out to... There's a rabbi who Orthodox Jewish rabbi that I can reach out to. He's also a very firm believer in Yeshua, and I will see what he has, if he has any insight on that, like, since he believes that the two are one, if he thinks that that has changed at all, or if this was like some new revelation that's kind of brought forth within the New Testament.
Yeah, and I am sorry about making the conversation drift on, if it was inconvenient, because I really wasn't expecting to have the conversation. I was, the next time you came in the stream, I was just gonna run that past you. It's just something I've seen, and I look at, and something keeps pulling me back to it. Like there's more to the story, and I clearly think there is more to the story, but it is what it is.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, usually, I mean, we typically have our Bible study. This one was a little bit different because we just kind of went over some very broad discussions, but usually our Bible studies are 2 to 3 hours long, and we're doing like verse by verse and then going through commentaries and discussion points on every little section.
Right.
So, yeah.
I'm definitely looking forward to the Isaac sacrifice.
Yes, that is probably going to be the longest one.
He's my favorite of the
there's so many questions, like
patriarchs.
It forces you to ask a billion questions, and everything's just stated like a quick matter of fact, like go up there, sacrifice your child, and then I'm gonna and then there's going to be a replacement.
Yeah.
Why? Is there tricking involved? Like, does he say to do one thing and then does the other? Like, that is not the MO of God.
Yeah.
There's so many questions in there, and so many different interpretations and takes on why. And
yeah.
So
I think it goes back to with it being the MO. It's not the MO of God to ask anyone to sacrifice their son. It's the other one who asks you to sacrifice your son to him. And that's why I think that God didn't allow him to go ahead and go through with it, was to make point that he would sacrifice his own son. And when I hear atheists talk about, well, that's not a God I'd want to serve anyway. Who would, in their right mind, ask you to sacrifice your son? But that's what God had to do. And he wasn't asking him to sacrifice his son. He was doing it symbolically to show in future how you would be able to identify the Messiah. And, like a lot of the things Jesus knew would happen, and so he carried those out prophetically. But there are things that are hidden, especially within Isaac's sacrifice, that he didn't have a hand in creating the outcome of the way it happened, as far as carrying his own wood, like Jesus carried his cross, and the ram that would be sacrificed got his head caught in a thorn bush. Mm-hmm. He didn't choose for them to say, hey, I know you're going to crucify me, so I'm going to need you to go ahead and put, a crown of thorns on my head, symbolically. That's something they chose to do, and that's something that Father foresaw. And so,
there's also interesting with the crown of thorns, and I'll have to pull up the rabbinical on this, but there's a tradition that on Abraham's on his casket or whatever that they were carrying through the wilderness, that the various kings and things would place their crowns on the casket, but they would put them like in a circle. And the way that they looked, like all these crowns sticking out, it looked like a crown of thorns upon the casket. And it's like a rabbinical thing that has nothing to do with the Messiah or anything else. It's just like something that was just noted randomly. But I think it's just very interesting because it
that's neat.
kind of paves this foreshadowing.
Sure. Yeah, I find it all fascinating.
The rabbinical stuff is 90% the reason why I'm positive that the other 10% being in scripture, but like the rabbinical is probably 90% of why I think that there's without a doubt Yeshua is the Messiah.
Well, I think you got it right.
Yeah. I just don't see how you can look at the rabbinical and be like, yeah, no, Yeshua wasn't. Like, it doesn't make any sense because even the rabbis who come after Christ, everything that they talk about is like, how do you not see Christ? Like, you have to be someone who is like a believer in Christ and you're just not saying it. Like, there's no way that you wrote all this commentary.
Why. But you know why,
Well,
Justin. Scripture tells you why.
I know. It's just,
and I know it's sad and frustrating, but it's just the way it is.
There's people where I read their commentaries on the Torah and then I'm just like, oh, this person is clearly a believer. Nope, not at all. Like, 100%.
You read any general commentary on any of the feast days, Purim especially, and tell and not sit there and be confused as to why they don't they don't know.
This is like every single verse.
They can't see it. But
I think that the Father made it that way.
See it.
Right. I think he's hardened
their
ears and.
Oh yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, they're definitely like. I don't know. I know that it's prophesied. I just don't know from a logical standpoint why anyone would say no. He can't be the Messiah.
But it won't be logical to you, Austin. Because your objective truth is completely different.
That's fair, yeah.
And they're raised different. You know, a lot of the testimonials I see of Jews converting to Jesus'
I'll be right back.
messianic belief is that in their household they're not allowed to talk about Jesus. Jesus is a cuss word, or Yeshua, or those types of stains and the ridicule that comes with it if you were to convert or to change or to even admit that you even think it might be him. The alienation that comes with it, I think
I get some of it to a degree because the way that the modern church teaches it would be complete heresy to anyone who's actually like a law-abiding Jew. You can't to say that you believe in something. What's up?
Quick random question: How do you say Israel in Hebrew? Isn't it Israel or something like that? Yeah,
Israel,
yeah. Because I've been watching videos on they're on how to do the full the Shema in Hebrew.
Love the Shema.
Pretty interesting.
Mm-hmm. Do you know it yet?
The Shema in Hebrew. What happened? Oh, not yet.
Oh, man. Let me know when you learn it.
Thank you. Pretty close.
I think it's me too with I'm sorry.
No, it's cool.
But I think the reason why it's become kind of the stain is for multiple reasons. One, the modern church teaches, Jewish people, Jesus came, made a new religion. You no longer have to follow any of the laws, so now you're supposed to be lawless. You also have to accept that Jesus is God. So now you have a God that's different than the fathers formerly knew. And then the other aspect is that the church who popularized these two concepts went around going to each synagogue, burning them down with women and children inside of them, and going around killing all of the Jews. And then the anti-Semitism that's bred into the church itself, if you look at all the different creeds from churches from like 300 AD all the way through like the medieval times, they say things like you have to first eat pig just before you enter into the area to prove that you're no longer Jewish, and you renounce all Jewish customs and the evil, dirty Jewish laws.
That's
By the way, those
stupid.
are God's laws. They're not dirty,
Exactly.
they're not evil. And then you have people like Martin Luther that come around. Sorry, hold on. Martin Luther comes around, which no one really talks about, but Martin Luther was a huge anti-Semitic, and he was basically was it like one of the chief Nazi leaders, was like the right hand of Hitler. Basically said like Martin Luther would have been on our side and he would have agreed with us, because Martin Luther wrote down pretty much the final solution, and then Hitler just carried it out. Martin Luther was all for like murdering.
Martin Luther was there when Hitler?
No, he was way before Hitler.
With Martin Luther.
But Martin Luther wanted to kill all of the Jewish men. He wanted to enslave, and basically said that they're like the women and the children were basically animals, and they should not have a part in this world. It was basically everything that Hitler did. Martin Luther wrote about how he, like, what he wanted to do to Jewish people. So the idea that, you know, this modern Christianity as a whole has anything pro-Jewish in mind, for a Jewish person to say, oh yeah, hey, by the way, I believe that this is now good and moral, you'd have to be out of your mind based on the history that the church has. Because the church history, the modern church and its roots in Rome, have always tried to destroy Israel, destroy Jewish people, and hated everything Jewish. And then telling a Jew, like, if you're a Jewish family and then you have a son, and then being like, oh, my son now wants to be part of the people who curse God's laws, claim that they believe in other gods, and also are part of the church that, you know, is why we are such a small nation. That's who they're going to. They're going to the rebels.
Quick question, D, are you new to this server? Like, are you like agnostic, atheist, Jewish?
Talking to Cal?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I was actually raised in a church that believed in the Old Testament only, and when I was a kid, they converted to believing that Yeshua was the Messiah. So I got to see both sides, but that's pretty much how I was raised, and I don't necessarily put a connotation on it. I believe in the Bible, I believe in Scripture, and I believe in Yeshua.
Yeah.
That's pretty much it.
I believe in miracles.
Yeah, awesome. This one that was trying to tell me, or that's supposedly Mary wasn't a virgin. Like, Mary had sex with God, apparently.
Oh God.
It was very weird. I don't want to ever hear what he said again.
There's a lot of people out there who have a lot of ideas.
Yeah.
And it just goes to show how creative people can be.
Yeah.
You'd have to ditch all the rabbinical, and when it says like the Holy Spirit came upon Mary, then you'd have to look back through scriptures and see who else did the Holy Spirit come upon, because it's a lot of people, and
They weren't pregnant.
Yeah. So you end up with a lot of issues when you interpret things one way without looking for consistency throughout all the scriptures. Yeah. Yeah. you see that with a lot of the like a lot of the
Jehovah's.
deity, well, a lot of the deity claims as well. It's like if you or like saying, you know, Jesus is an angel, or Jesus is this, Jesus is that. You're not, when you do that, you don't look at the rest of scriptures and apply the same logic. You say, oh, because Jesus is special and unique, that this phrase only applies to him, and it applies in this way, and no other person it can apply to in that way. So it's if you're not being consistent with how you look at it, like if I say, you know, Moses is called Moshe Ish Halayim, and so if it says Moses is the man God, well then why when Jesus is referred to, why is it when Jesus is referred to as, you know, being or referring to himself as like an Elohim, why is that deity but Moses is not deity? And you'd say, oh, well, because when it's Moses, you know, a better understanding would be like God.
Let's just get the crap out of him.
Being a judge, or like God being God was working through him. But then when you get to Jesus, you're like, well, but that means that he's literally God because it's different.
People don't look at Deuteronomy 6:4. It proves he's one.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think that you
don't
have to be
understand
consistent.
The rule of
with things.
agency. That's the problem.
Yeah, and you have to be consistent in scripture, and if you're not consistent, then that you're going to have a lot of issues. Because that's how you make a, like, even I can read the Bible completely through the lens of being like a Mormon, being like, oh look, everyone becomes a god. Because you have Moses being a god, you have
Mormons
angels being God, you have essentially the high priest.
Sailor.
You have the high priests being gods.
What's that? The lady with the really big smile, Joyce Meyer. They believe that we're all gods, little g's, gods.
Oh no!
But like in the sense of a deity, or like they believe we're a deity.
Literally, they believe in basically manifesting powers. Essentially, that's like the kind of church I grew up in. Like,
everyone's a demigod, essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, their reference point is that if a cow was to have children, you would call them baby cows, and if chickens were to have, you know, babies after the eggs, then you call them baby chickens. And so when God has children, we don't call them people. You know, they're baby gods. So that was Joyce's exact.
This is where you end up getting the same theology as the Mormon theology, like
but those guys aren't believers. They just create a wackadoodle load of nonsense to make themselves money. That's just
right. Well, yeah.
They just prey on the weak and those who are desperate and try to take their money.
If people would just read the like how to identify a false prophet and then just apply it to anyone who comes and says, you know, like, hey, I believe Jesus is the Messiah too, and this is what I believe. Okay, apply the logic. Do they teach against the laws? Do they tell you to follow a different God? And have they prophesied anything that did not come to pass? That's it.
Yeah, now, my question with Jehovah's is Witness, like, how did they get the name Jehovah? Because the letter J did not exist when the Torah was even here. So Moses did not write it. Moshe did not write it yet.
They say it's the proper
I'm still trying to figure out the theology.
Yeah, their stance on it is that it is a J, and that they just never pronounced it as a J, but it is a J sound.
Well, it's the same way that Yeshua became Joshua.
Yeah.
Jeshua to Joshua.
It's all the name stuff is just, I don't know. Anyone that cares that much about the correct pronunciation of a name that is spelled in consonants only.
There's no point.
Yeah. It's
completely irrelevant.
Like, show me where in the Bible it says, like, you are not saved unless you pronounce my name correctly. And you have this color of skin, or whatever other things that each weird group teaches.
Oh yeah, these Black Hebrew Israelites try to use Rev 114 to prove that that Yeshua was black, that the Messiah was black. They used Revelation 114.
Or the hair like
It was like wool and color.
Yeah.
Skin was like bronze. Yeah. I mean, he could be, but why does color matter?
It doesn't.
Yeah, I mean, in my opinion, I think he could have been. I definitely think he was darker than what I am today. But when I look at Jews as a whole in Israel, they're not dark Middle Eastern or African descent. And I think the key to that, which I'm not saying to take the Book of Enoch as, scripture. I think there was a reason why it wasn't put in there, even if, your conspiracy theories, all that, the Father still knew what the finished product was going to be. And so the Book of Enoch was left out. But in there, Noah is described as being hair that was white, like the blondest hair, and he was our proliferation point. Everything came from him. But even still, if that was the case, you're still having black people, Hispanic people, all these different other colors coming from someone who was said to be of very, very light skin and white hair. So
yeah.
Wait, what?
I'm very I'm
No,
very
no. Wait, back it up. I didn't understand that point. What?
Okay, so in the Book of Enoch, Lamech went to Enoch, Noah's grandfather, and said, "Hey, my wife just bore a son, and he can't be mine because he doesn't look like me. He has white hair."
So, are you saying that Messiah looked like that?
No, I'm saying that even with him being referenced as a light-skinned person, and everybody coming from him, we have no actual idea what his wife looked like. And so just because it goes, I'm just going back to people who say, well, Jesus was white because he's from Noah's bloodline and Noah was a bright white man. And that can be easily refuted because we don't know what Noah's wife looked like.
But did they use what?
Even if he was.
But are they using the book? Are they using the Book of Enoch to substantiate that Noah was white?
Yes. Yeah. There's no other way to substantiate it at all.
But then you can just contest the validity of the Book of Enoch.
Sure.
Because we only actually have very small surviving portions of the original Book of Enoch.
Yeah. And like I said, I don't take it as, scripture, but, if it was written by Enoch, a man who would...
Well, there was definitely a Book of Enoch, but the Book of Enoch that most people would profess is the Book of Enoch is possibly not the Book of Enoch, and there isn't actually a way to fully substantiate the various books of Enoch that we do have. The most ancient surviving portions that we do have are from the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Right.
So it's an interesting text, of course, but can't really historically substantiate its validity.
Correct. As what I was saying, I think that there's a reason why it didn't make it into our canon. A lot of people are like,
I think our canon is a pile of trash. I think there's plenty of stuff that should have been in there that isn't. But that's a whole other discussion.
Right.
I think the Didache should still be in the New Testament.
Oh,
Whatever.
definitely.
But then that's what I'm saying. It goes back to the Father, right? And so he knew exactly what the finished product was going to be before he ever, essentially pressed play on the universe. So he knew what we were going to have to seek salvation before he ever, cast things into existence. So, it goes for me as far as trusting what's in there as to, because a lot of people are like, well, how do you know that the Bible's true, right? And how do you know that you're seeking the right God? And it's because if God didn't give us a way and we essentially really were damned from the beginning, then why would you want to serve a God who essentially is like rubbing it in your face, right? So if there is a good God, then he made a way, and he not only made the way, but he is the way, and he knew everything was going to fall into place as it was. And the only book for me that does it, that proves itself, is the Bible. So
Yeah.
True, but some of that is part of that is a statement of faith. So
sure. But the point I guess I'm trying to convey is what else do you have?
well,
I think that's
everyone has to pick a foundation, don't they? Regardless of what that foundation is. Like everyone in their life has a set of beliefs, whether that's beliefs in themselves, beliefs in the things around them. They have a belief. They have a faith. Whether people want to accept that or not, the way they formulate their identity, the way they interact with their surroundings, is all based on beliefs that they use to ground themselves. And
same thing
it's
when
just you've from a purely non-spiritual perspective, you've picked the scriptures as your foundation and you don't deviate from that. There is like a lot of proof. It is the most substantiated text of antiquity that out there, and there is all that other stuff, but you still made a choice to make that your foundation. So the statement's always going to be a statement of faith.
Sure. It's the same thing when you go out in the morning and start your vehicle to go to work. You assume through faith that it's going to start because you've put your faith in the people who you spent so much money on that vehicle that it's going to run the way that you think it's supposed to run.
Plus, it started the day before, I imagine.
Power of belief.
On a completely unrelated note, I really want to play Cyberpunk.
What is Cyberpunk?
I've never played it.
It's a game.
Yep, never played it.
Yeah, I only play Warzone.
Warzone is so boring.
Yeah,
I like
I'm waiting on
Warzone.
the anti-cheat.
Yeah, a lot of people have stopped playing.
Yeah, that's where I'm at. If the anti-cheat doesn't work, I'm just going to find a new game. So. I have no faith in them. I'll say that. But they've advertised it so hard that if it fails, I believe that they will fail.
Wait,
So,
they've got an anti-cheat like update coming?
yes. Yeah, it's called Ricochet. They're advertising the crap out of it too. It's supposed to, like when you sign on, it automatically downloads like a Trojan into your computer, and it will take down your graphics card, serial number, your GPU, your CPU, all of it. And so if you ever are caught cheating with their new algorithms, then all of that hardware is banned, not your account. So you can't just make another account You have to literally rip the guts out of your computer, put new in if you want to continue playing.
But wouldn't that be an issue if you were to go and sell your graphics card and then later to find out like, oh, this is a banned graphics card?
Yep, it most certainly would.
That could be poopy.
Yep. Those will just be the ones that you can get cheaper so that you can mine crypto, since that's what they do with them.
Good old crypto. Ooh, Kingdoms of Alamar.
Yeah. Just sell them off to crypto guys. Like, you're using a banned crypto card.
Yep.
I guess that would make those ones a lot cheaper.
Yeah, I would think so. Right now they're so outrageous. You can't even get the really, really high end ones brand new because they're so backed up.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I tried getting the what is it, the 370s or whatever, or 3070s, 4070s. What?
I got a 3080.
3080, yeah. 3090.
Yeah, I've been trying to find one that's actually available, and they don't exist.
Yep.
Well, over here at the moment, it's cheaper to buy a pre-build than it is to buy the components because of the same reason.
Yeah, I can buy a fully built computer with a 3090 in it or whatever, and it'll cost me like $3,000. But if I wanted a 3090 by itself, it might be like $3,500.
Mm-hmm. It's insane.
Yeah, just, and MSRP is only 800. It's just marked up so high.
The world is going crazy.
Mm-hmm. Indeed.
I think we're gonna get some answers real soon.
The Messiah coming?
Just all of it. I just think it's all about to roll out like a red carpet.
I want to get married first. It's not happening yet.
Is it okay if it's a really, really big wedding celebration?
Yeah.
Okay. Because that's what's gonna happen when Messiah returns.
Yeah, but I wanna marry my
marriage
now
ceremony.
husband.
Even before there's no marriage and no being married.
Well, I wanna, it's the one thing I want to experience in life. You've already had it, Austin.
I barely. I've only had like 4 kids.
How old are you?
Me?
You don't mind me asking. Sorry,
Or-
no. She's not married.
Are you asking me? Sorry,
Yeah.
or Austin?
Yeah.
Me?
Yeah. How old are you? Yeah. Sorry, I don't know your name.
My name's Rebecca.
Okay.
I'm 36.
36. All right. Huh? You've when you talk to Father about your kingdom spouse, do you reference it as that you're waiting on your kingdom spouse?
What's a kingdom spouse?
So, like, if you were to pray to Father and you would be like, I'm really looking forward to a kingdom spouse, Father, and I know you say that that we have not because we ask not, and so I'm here asking, and but I want what you want for me, not what I think I want, but what I want. Sometimes it takes time, so I don't lose hope or feel down about that you're 36 and not married, because sometimes it takes time to match up the right light.
Well, she has one. Yeah, she's engaged. She's ready to go.
It's okay. I'm engaged. I'm ready to go.
Okay.
It's just that because of the travel restriction, she's not allowed to see her husband at all ever.
Oh.
Yeah, we're 10,000 miles apart.
Yeah,
10,000.
It's just a boat ride
Drop in the
away.
ocean.
Yeah.
We were supposed to get married, but then COVID hit, and so I couldn't apply for my visa.
Gotcha.
So we haven't seen each other now in 2 years. 2 years, over 2 years now.
Yeah.
I got
And he's not on Discord anymore.
By myself, time zone difference, Austin.
Well, tell him to stop being all time zoney.
10,000 miles is a large time zone difference.
Yeah, I'm in a time zone right now, and I show up.
10,000 miles. Yeah, but it's like 3 o'clock in the morning for him or something ridiculous, and he's got kids, Austin.
Yeah, him and who's it? Wildwoods. Both of them.
I think praying for a spouse is probably one of the most dangerous prayers.
I think you just need to word it correctly.
I'm gonna hook you up with some patience right now.
Yep. Welcome to the long suffering.
We all have a wilderness to walk through.
Hey, having a partner in life is hard work.
Like, oh, you want a spouse? All right, we're gonna start off with fasting for 40 years.
You're gonna wait and work 7 years.
Like even in The Lion King, when Simba's trying to find himself and rediscover himself, he has to go through the wilderness following Rafiki the monkey. He has to go through the wilderness before he comes to the pond where he sees his father's reflection in himself.
Oh.
Yeah, but he was pretty stupid.
Yeah.
He just wants to be king, all right? He just couldn't wait to be king. I don't know if you
I
heard.
just can't wait to be king.
It's all he's ever wanted.
Yeah. Well, he had given up those desires, you know. He thought he had killed his father because his uncle did. It made him feel bad about it.
He didn't give up on it. He just wallowed in self-pity for far too long.
Yeah. Yes, he did.
He was crying like a baby in the forest.
Yeah.
Pretending he didn't care.
Yeah. Hakuna Matata.
Oh man, what a wonderful phrase.
Means no worries for the rest of your days.
That's what I like about these problem-free philosophies.
Yeah, eventually you gotta face him.
Welcome to the snowflake generation of today. Bunch of worse pussy pansies.
Mm-hmm. Everything is just so backwards. Just life is backwards. Everything is backwards. Nothing makes sense anymore.
No one's got any, like, gumption or guts anymore. Everyone's just like a wilting flower.
I know that just by saying the Messiah is coming soon, it implies that I now know the day that the Messiah will return, and therefore the Messiah is not going to return on that day. But at the same time, I feel like...
Gangsta.
Yeah, but at the same time, I feel like it's soon because of how the world is right now.
Well, to say it's soon is not to say the day or the hour.
That's true.
And it's been coming since the day of his ascension, so...
That's true. And the disciples were like, he's coming, he's coming.
The time has always been at hand.
Yeah, you know what? Now I blame the disciples.
Everything took place on a feast regarding his, crucifixion, resurrection. I thought it was neat that I think it's Rosh Hashanah.
Oh yeah, Feast of Trumpets.
It's generally a 2-day festival or a period because they don't exactly know when the moon will hit.
Well, I bet you, somehow we've got the calendars all completely wrong, and that's why we'll be shocked when he turns up. We'll be like, wait a minute, and then he'll be like, hey, no, you wait a minute.
No. Like, why is there a giant trumpet right now? That's not supposed to happen until another month.
Yeah, or next week or tomorrow. Yep. I think it's all gonna be pretty cool. I don't think we're that far away though. I'm of that mindset.
It will be when it will be. I think we
That's
should
true.
concentrate on one day at a time.
Yeah, there's obviously more people that he's trying to get in the kingdom.
Well, while he's still not here, there's still mercy for others. So that's also a good thing.
Yeah.
Yep. And I tell people that with in regards to the Noah story, how Noah went around telling everybody that the flood was coming, it was going to rain. It had never rained, and so they didn't believe him. But when the rain started coming, God shut the door, supernaturally from the outside. And I think that's a picture of how it will be when Messiah is revealed. That at that point, it'll be too late. And so,
Indeed. Everyone with their lamps and their oil.
mm-hmm.
60% off Divinity 2 Original Sin Deluxe Edition.
Ooh. Original Sin. Sounds Roman.
I'm kind of waiting for that one to come on sale on the Apple Store so I can play it on my iPad.
Hold on. All right, I'm logging off, but it was a good chat, and I will be on probably later this week to do more of this chatting.
I should probably get some rest. Poorly me should probably get some rest.
Yeah, definitely. All right, I'll talk